when you're a director, that means I don't do anything. Really. I mean, I'm serious.
Oh, be careful. I said something similar once, and I got raked over the coals.
Oh, no. When things go bad, you do a lot. But when things go well, you just admire and trust and respect the people you work with.
Victoria, is it possible to shoot a 95-page feature film in 14 days?
Absolutely.
Well, how do you know that?
Because we just did. Welcome to Indie Film Podcast. I'm Victoria.
And I am Chuck. This week, we are reporting back on our 2-week feature film shoot with Jack Judson. Welcome back, Jack Judson, writer and director of Pineapple Promise. And we're going to break down the good, the bad, and the ugly of the feature film shoot. But why don't we start off with just a breakdown of locations, cast, crew, and equipment.
Budget.
Yeah, budget. We can do budget
Money.
too.
Cold, hard money.
All the elements that were involved in this film. So let's start with crew. Do you want to break that down for us, Jack? Who did you have on as crew?
Sure. So we had myself as the director. We also had Danny Clamoris as our cinematographer. And we had a first AC, a first AD, and we also had Victoria as the lead producer. But, and we'll get to this little teaser, also the lead actress in the film. And that presents its own set of problems, and hopefully that won't be in Victoria's ugly category later.
And then we also had fantastic location sound recordist, Chuck.
Yes, I was in charge of the sound recording for this one. Hopefully I remember to hit speed on everything. We'll find out as you edit it, Jack.
And I'm sorry I left you out.
I thought it was perfect.
It's very true to form. Sound usually gets ignored.
Yes. People look to the left, or if you're watching this, to the right normally when they're on this as a guest, on this podcast as a guest, because that's where Victoria sits. All right, so the crew, very minimalist. And I think that you brought on the first AD based on Victoria's input because it was going to be hard to do a lot of the production stuff. Not first AD, but just assistant director. Do a lot of the production stuff with her on camera for a majority of the film. But basically, I felt like everybody was doing a lot of roles.
Yeah.
And, Danny and Grace, who were on the camera department, those two, were doing...
Our whole camera department.
Yeah, they were
our G&E too, and gaff. Yeah.
Gaffing. Everybody was responsible for digital information transfer, DIT.
Yeah.
And... Well, excuse me. I guess Danny and I, and you too, Jack, were just getting all that stuff sorted out. Sam, the assistant director, was also taking notes on the script. Yeah. She was running slate.
She was handling a little bit of art department some days.
Yeah, taking care of art department, making sure that those ice creams were ready when we shot a day in with children. Very young children.
Be careful what you write into a script.
Yes, and she was responsible for that while still trying to run slate for a lot of the takes. It was wild. It was a wild shoot. But the thing is you got it done, you got it organized, and everybody got paid on the crew, and it got paid for something that's not commercial, which I thought was super cool.
Yeah, that's not something you see every day. And I guess that is one, I guess we could have started here. After filming, it was a total of 14 days of the shoot itself for a 95-page feature film. Mm-hmm. 13 of which happened over the last 16 days. Well, I guess last 20 days now because it's been a few days since we wrapped. But 13 of those days were over 16-day shooting period.
Yeah.
Jack, did you get all the footage you needed to cover the script?
I can conclusively say yes, and it was awesome and beautiful, and it was thanks to all of the crew we just mentioned, especially Chuck. Actually, I'll circle back since I did forget the sound man. But what I would...
I'm going to mute your microphone.
Exactly.
It's okay, I can just dub it over.
Mute button on this episode. But
I can dub it over in post.
I didn't realize it was to mute me. I will say, circling back, yes. So if you remember from the last episode, we added the last two crew members, maybe our two most integral, our first, they were just our AC and our AD. They also did all of the numbers that you want to put in front of an AC or AD, as Victoria alluded to, because they played and wore multiple hats. But I would say that in retrospect, as we said, the gift of fundraising and having hit your goal ahead of time and keeping our initial plan lean was that adding these two players with 2 weeks before the shoot made us able to look at our budget, pay them their requested salary, and then bring them on. But now that we are at a time after the shoot, they were indispensable.
For sure.
And they wore, as you alluded to, Chuck, multiple hats. But I would say too, jumping ahead, but the thing about having a sound recordist and location sound that is also your sound mixer, that is so integral to this process, and also having worked with them before, is that, it's true. Victoria said it. Oftentimes the sound gets ignored. But, David Mamet famously said about playwriting, it doesn't matter if I can't fucking hear you.
Yeah.
And sound is the thing you do not want to overlook. Yes, it's a visual medium, but and we can get into the nitty gritty, but because we were working quickly, we were taking longer takes. I was using a lot of wides. We were shooting anamorphic at one particular point. It put Chuck into a bind. And so it was the relationship and his skills and his adaptability and the fact that we have a working relationship where I could look at him and check in and say, hey, yes, we're going to spend a lot of time in post dealing with this, but is this okay? And having a sound recordist with experience, with expertise, but who is also a sound engineer and is going to do your post makes that a seamless process. Now, not one without bumps, as Chuck can speak to later. Maybe this will be in his ugly department, but it is an integral part, and don't forget sound.
Yeah.
Like I did at the top of the show.
Well, it's easy. You shouldn't have to think about sound, unfortunately. I mean, it's important that you do think about it, but that's why you offload a lot of that stuff. And I thank you so much for the compliment, Jack, on that. I also want to compliment Danny, the cinematographer, who does all the post color grading, and I'm sure he'll be doing a lot of masking and things. I just want to point out that it's nice the way that you organize things, that you brought us on for those roles, because being able to identify problems that you've seen in post or that you've heard in post and being there on the shoot gives me a heads up. And I'm sure Danny would say the same thing on the camera department. If the shot the exposure isn't correctly composed on, the various levels or various subjects, he knows what he can mask in post. And me understanding like how I can grab these lines in the wild on a separate audio only take so that I can layer that up with the more chaotic shots. For example, we did a shot where Danny was running with his gimbal and chasing Victoria, leading Victoria, following Victoria, and running along the side of Victoria in the woods. And this was
not simultaneously. They were all different takes. Danny cannot yet multiply himself.
No. So
to be fair.
Yeah. And you don't want to have all that coverage for one person anyway, otherwise the camera will be in the shot. But to keep the boom out of the shot, which the audio is not going to be that usable anyway, it was a really crunchy forest, and you could hear that there were multiple people running alongside Victoria, right? And so we decided to just do an audio-only take where Victoria almost sprained her ankle, where she was running around my boom in a circle and
Chuck
shouting
was
her
the
lines.
sun, Victoria was the earth, and they were running in the woods after she had done 10 takes in 96-degree weather with bad air quality.
Yeah.
But it's important. And
that's indie filmmaking. It's a lot of cardio.
It's indie filmmaking, and it was Chuck's foresight to say, hey, we're going to need this, and we're going to be glad we have it. So thank you, Victoria, but we're going to need you to run a little bit more.
No, I just assumed Chuck was mad at me that day.
Oh, yeah, I totally had enough sound effects in my library to be able to do that, but I just wanted to see Victoria run in circles quite literally around me.
It's a good day.
No, but it was a very crunchy forest. So we'll see how it all comes together in post with all those footsteps. I just kind of feel like it was necessary to get it in the space because it would be really hard to capture that again or isolate single footsteps with multiple people running at the same time.
Yeah.
So we'll see how naturally it comes together, and if anybody's listening when they actually end up watching the film, you'll be able to know that was not live sound.
Which I think will be very entertaining because I think you will notice that between take one and then the final audio only take, you'll notice the footsteps slow down drastically. They're not quite as fast anymore.
That's good. Well, I can always speed it up.
Oh, good,
It's more difficult to slow it down. So do you want to talk about the cast? So we talked about the crew. Basically, just to review, it was 5 people on the crew. So cast, You want to
Sure.
break that down a little bit?
Absolutely. So we had two principals, Victoria playing our lead Neve, and Mark Ewens playing Benny, the other co-lead and co-protagonist in the story. And then beyond that, we had a cast of day players. We had my daughter playing Benny's daughter, Rose. We had an actor named Mike Hennessy playing Victoria's father. And then we had 7 other character day players throughout that made the film indispensable and allowed us to fill out the world of the story with an ensemble.
Yeah, and it was basically Victoria and Mark were there almost every day. They had a couple of individual days where they were shooting with other characters, and you brought in the other characters for single day shoots.
Correct.
And then left the cabin in the woods, which was a travel. We spent 2 nights about 100 miles outside of Boise, and those 2 days were just Victoria and Mark, which
Correct.
I thought was good organization.
Yeah.
That was a lot easier because you don't want to bring up 2 other random day players and then have to worry about lodging and food and all of those other additional expenses for that. And then
Or
just
them,
the
yeah.
logistics.
Yeah, of them trying to drive up and then film and then theoretically drive back. And that's 200 miles in one day. And that's a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a lot for one person.
Yeah,
For
and it's
an
a
indie
mountainous
film
road
rate.
up there, so 100 miles ends up being like 2.5 hours
Yeah.
in driving, plus traffic because everybody's moving to Idaho. So
That's right. And if you're going to ask actors to do a lot for little, and yes, we paid them, but still a lot for little, and we're making a film about mental health, then please consider the crew and cast and their own mental health and stamina.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah.
And you did break up. It was 16 days, 13 of them shooting, and I'd say there were probably 3 really long days in there.
3 hell days.
Yes. And the first rough one was a AM shoot and then an evening shoot.
Correct?
But we then took the next day off.
Correct.
So we had a call time. I want to say it was 6 a.m.
And 10 p.m.
and
or 9 p.m.
9 p.m. the same day.
Yes.
Same day.
So it was a full day shoot, basically.
So if you're a fan of siestas, you got yourself a break.
That was
Otherwise, it was a very long morning and evening.
Yes, and so we shot into that Monday or into that next day, but then that day there was no other planned shoots, which was great. And then up in McCall, there was a very long day up in McCall.
Yeah.
And what's the third day that I'm forgetting? now?
The right before it, I think, was the other pretty long one. So we went from a 6 a.m. call into shooting until about 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Then it was the full unit move, the 100 or so miles outside of town, and then some set deck and graffitiing a rock that needed to look like it had been graffitied, sincerely hoping that there would be no rain that night.
Yeah,
To wash it all away.
because we didn't graffiti the rock. It was
was chalk.
Chalk, yeah,
Chalk.
liquid chalk. So it would have just washed it all out, which it didn't rain.
It
It did not.
So we
so
were
we
good
were
there.
fine. But then finally calling it a night there and into the next morning, which was sun up to sundown.
Yeah,
It was a wily 48 hours. That was the hardest part of the shoot.
For
and
sure.
that morning, just as a coda here, involved shooting with llamas.
Yes.
And asking llamas and goats,
Yes.
And goats
to be
and chickens.
and chickens and cows, and asking them to participate,
Yeah.
follow
Yeah.
direction. I don't know that they can follow direction, but
They were
asking
not
them,
necessarily trained for that.
yes, we did not have an animal wrangler.
yeah.
No, it was just a very
they,
angular.
They seem
wrangler.
to have been fed recently too, so it was hard to manipulate them with food and treats. But we got a llama in the shot. I think
We
you got
did.
a llama in the shot.
We
Yeah.
did. We got what we needed.
Yeah.
That was the important part.
Yeah. So animals, children, it was a wild shoot. But on those marathon days, there was always a break immediately after that for some rest and some respite, which I appreciated greatly.
Yeah.
So I like those logistics. I did want to touch on real quick because there's a lot of people on YouTube that are equipment curious and equipment hungry. Should I just break down the equipment? I talked to Danny about his lenses and his rigs.
Do it, Chuck.
You absolutely
Yes.
should. But also, I think podcasting platforms, Spotify and Apple Podcast, they all like gear stuff too. So I think that's
For
fine.
sure.
Yeah.
And this is not an endorsement of any of these products. This is just what we used, and everything made it through the shoot. So,
Yeah, so I feel like that is kind of an endorsement. We
Yeah.
just said we were filming in a lot of wild locations, and all the gear did survive. So that's either due to care of the people using the gear, which is fair. There was a lot of that. But also, the gear can hold up.
Yes. Well, I had some sound
Well, you
issues,
did,
but we can
yeah.
go through that. So the Red Komodo 6K is what Danny uses as his primary camera. He also had a Nikon ZR for mobile shots
Yes.
that he put on a DJI gimbal, and then he used DZO film Vespid cinema lenses as well as Kato anamorphic Lazar Kato. He has aperture lights, and then for the boom mics, I just used Sennheiser MKH. F8N Pro is what I recorded on, and then I ended up using Prosumer Labs, which was a Ceramonic K9, and then the Rode Wireless Pro, which record internally.
Which is
so
nice.
if they lose their signal, you have backup. And they also offer time code, so you can sync it in post if you end up losing that. So it's like a lower cost hack, because if you get some really expensive top end labs are not cheap.
No.
So it's hard to justify that when you're doing indie film budget stuff. So locations. Do you want to talk about that? We touched on the farm,
Yes.
and then the cabin in the woods, but the rest of them you sourced,
Correct.
and they were basically super low cost.
Yes, we had everything but one location in kind, and we alluded to this in the last episode, where while that is very generous, the known potential issue with that is if any of these locations decided they didn't want to allow us to shoot there for free.
Yeah.
They could change their mind.
They could change their mind, but they all came through.
Yeah.
So we used a theater, my house, my neighbor, the exteriors of my neighbor's house. We always, if you have an upstairs and a downstairs and they're not needed for every shot, we flipped the upstairs for Benny's house and the downstairs for Neve's house. So you can get creative with a singular location.
Yeah.
We used the land up in McCall for the climax of the shoot. We also used a theater, a yoga studio, a gym, and a cafe.
And a motel.
And a hotel.
Yeah.
And all of them were given to us for free minus one, which was incredibly generous.
Yeah, I wrote that down.
Yeah.
The location budget was $400.
Which, with that many locations, is very impressive.
Worked some favors.
Yeah.
There was some trade going on there too, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. So the budget itself, so everybody knows, the grand total was just under $31,000 is what it cost to make this shoot this film.
Yes.
Yes.
And you
For
still
principal
have
photography.
Yeah, and you have budget set aside for post, Jack, which is awesome. I have it broken down. So the cast was about $8,200. You had 2 players that were basically at every single shoot, and then you paid the other actors a day rate. Crew, obviously most expensive line item because everybody was there every single day. That was $14,300. Craft services,
But that was crew and gear.
crew and gear. Yes,
Crew and gear.
correct.
So,
Because Danny and Grace had some pretty gnarly equipment.
yeah.
And so the camera department got a bonus for being able to bring all that stuff up. And craft services, $3,000. And then miscellaneous and art department. Miscellaneous is $2,000, and art department was an extra $1,000. Oh, and office contingency, $2,000. But we didn't have to use any contingency.
We did not.
Correct?
which is, I think we did end up having to move that a little bit because we expanded the crew size.
Oh,
That's
true.
where some of that budget came from.
Okay.
Art department budget we kept very, very low. So there was a little bit, though $2,000 for an art department budget for a feature film is already quite low. But we managed
Slice
to
of
keep it
life.
under
Still
that.
came under. So you
did.
can take that as a pro or con.
Yeah.
Wait
No.
till you see the film.
It's not a sci-fi and it's not a horror film. So I think
No.
you're
no
doing
VFX,
okay.
no
Yeah.
makeup.
Though I will say the one thing I was the most proud of was craft services. I was very nervous about that number because I did over budget initially, hopefully enough so to offset anything that I was kind of worried about by expanding the crew size. Crafty is the one thing that can really, really, I guess our department budget can too, but crafty budgets can really sneak up on you. And before you know it, you're going over substantial. It's just you needed more water than you thought you were going to need.
Yeah.
You ended up needing more food than you thought you were going to need. People ended up staying longer, so you ended up having to buy extra meals or whatever it is. But for this one, especially with inflation being what it is right now and food costs being what they are right now, this is not a political statement. This is just the realities. Food costs more than it did 12 months ago. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So this is something that we had to take into account, but it's kind of hard to predict because some of those prices are so volatile right now too.
For sure.
And they go up and down with no rhyme or reason. So the fact that we were able to stay under on Crafty budget with 5 people expected on set for crew every day and at least 2 actors on set every day, we kept it at an estimated $250 per day. For Crafty, which I realize saying that again now, I'm like, why did I think that was enough money? That's very risky. But it did work. We were able to stay under. We did have some half shoot days where all we were doing was snacks. We weren't worrying about catering a whole meal. So that is something worth keeping in mind too.
Yeah.
But in case you're trying to plan a Crafty budget right now for approximately 7-ish people guesstimated as our base number, we leaned into $250 a day and we came out okay.
And make that a generous line item because you do not want to skimp on Crafty.
No.
You may be thinking about a lens kit or a camera mount rig rental.
Yeah.
Save it for craft. There's a reason Colin Farrell once gave that award speech and thanked Craft Services, which was very good PR for him, but also very honest. And you have to take care of your people.
You do. And an
For sure.
army marches on its stomach. Keep people fed. It's important.
No, they march on their feet.
I beg
what?
to differ.
Oh, because of the fuel. Now I get it.
There we go. We got there. Anyway, sorry.
So-
that was just, 'cause we get asked a lot about what to forecast for budget for Crafty. How do you know?
And not to get us too much into the weeds, but if I can interject, the one unforeseen added expense was a $3,000. We needed more storage.
Oops.
And if we want to talk about inflation, the singular inflammatory price hike at this current juncture is on chips and data storage. So not to get too much into the weeds, but for the gearheads out there, we had originally budgeted a $4,000 12 terabyte OWC Gemini, top of the line, amazing. Because we needed to work fast and I wanted to do longer takes to let the actors breathe and have time to move. And doing longer takes and doing singles and quasi-oneers, we can get into that a little bit, allows you to move faster. But it requires an extensive amount of data.
When you're shooting Red Raw 6K, it's going to eat up those 1 terabyte memory cards quickly.
Really quickly. And we averaged about 600 a day, and we had that 48-hour period was about 1.5 terabytes of data, just to show you what was happening. But we needed 8 more terabytes, and so because of the chip shortage, that required still a very powerful drive, an SSD OWC, but it was $3,000. It was about only 40%. Less than, I don't know if my math's adding up there, but less than the 12 terabyte higher end drive because of the shortage. So unfortunately, if you're out there and you're looking to buy storage, we don't know when it's going to go down, but whatever you can do to anticipate how much data you are going to use or how much you're going to need, and it's usually more than you think.
Yeah.
It's a worthy investment. But unfortunately, when is it going to come down again? It may never. But that was one of the biggest unforeseen expense.
Yeah.
A $3,000 line item.
That definitely stings based on the history of SSD prices. That hurts a little bit because I bet that same drive was around $1,000 or
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
Too bad. But that's where we live, and that's something that's important that when people shoot feature films. I remember the last feature film I worked on, we ended up getting 3 separate 16 terabyte drives just to make sure that we had 3 backups of it. The 2 of them are slower, which is fine. But it's like, now if you're going to shoot a feature film, I don't think you get in on that under 12 terabytes of data. And if you have one drive corrupt, you might be in a sticky situation. So, get a good one that's fast to edit on and get at least one more that's slow to back it up and get that line item on there because that might be cutting into your crew.
And my personal favorite, have a third redundancy option that is cloud storage. So that way it can be accessed anywhere, anytime, just in case your drives and your computers die.
Ooh.
And since we're
Cloud.
here, just in case anyone's interested in the setup, we do. I did say we had the primary editing drive, but to Chuck's point, and then to Victoria's, I have the exact model, one speed level below OWC Gemini, just not the Pro series, is our backup. And then our cinematographer has, outside of my home, we don't live together. We spend way too much time together, but we don't live together, has both all of our footage and backed up on a slower drive. So we have it in 4 places, and we do have minimal just selects, and we'll have cache on cloud storage and timeline saves.
Perfect.
So just if you're interested in workflow for the post process, that's a little teaser.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
The redundancy is good. So
It's important.
sound. If anyone's curious about the sound aspect, the recorder I have, and most professional level recorders have redundancy built in. So it's recording to 2 SSDs at the same time. And then I uploaded everything every day for you onto the cloud, and then also have it backed up on my hard drive here at home. It's good to have the zipped file on the cloud.
It's nice. Yeah, just keep it there, just in case.
But that did remind me of a situation where my recorder, the transmitter, the SSD card failed.
Yeah.
That was the first sound issue. Maybe we should get into the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Sure,
That's the ugly first for me.
Yeah,
because I had
a good transition.
I had some sound failures, which was the SSD didn't record a day, which is unfortunate. Because hopefully, everything goes through on that. But that was Victoria's lav. The internal recording just toasted. No, I
destroyed a lav.
Micro SD cards go bad. I want to blame the company, but you really can't, because they just. You don't know what it is, but and then I had an Audio Technica boom that was getting radio interference from Danny's wireless transmission, which is wild.
For the focus puller and for the director's monitor.
Yep, correct. And he had 2 other monitors. Yeah, focus puller monitor. Focus puller was also, these are all 2.4 Gs, but they were interfering sometimes with the lav wireless signal, but also it interfered with the boom. And fortunately, I was able to borrow a buddy of mine's Sennheiser MKH50 for interior stuff. The Sennheiser. So I just want to tell everybody out there, don't skimp on the indoor microphone, which, because you have so much wireless going on. Wild. I didn't expect that to happen at all. And I tested all my other microphones after I found out that was the culprit, and none of the other ones were responding that way. So it was an issue with that specific microphone, which is the Audio Technica 4053B.
Nice.
And that one, for some reason, was just the capsule on it was picking up some interference off of Danny's wireless transmission.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I personally love that static interference noise going through. I think that's what everyone craves.
No, it gives sound people a heart attack.
It would be a choice. Not one I would like to make. No, it would be a choice.
This is why I'm not the director on this one. Got it.
Yeah.
But what about the good and the bad then, Chug?
Good. The good was everything. We got everything that we needed, which was fantastic. We shot. All the shoot days were either ended on time or early, which I credit to you all organizing it so well, because unfortunately that should be the baseline for an indie film set, but I've been on a lot of indie film sets, and that's not necessarily always the baseline experience.
No.
Sometimes you go over.
But that, to your point, Chuck, it was Jack and Danny had gone through at every single location and done a detailed shot list of every single scene, how all this was planned to play out, whether or not we were able to stick to exactly the shot list just based on weird happenstance or new ideas in the moment, that's fine. But there was a baseline to start from, which made it so much easier when I was going through and making call sheets that I could look at how many shots are we expecting to get, how many exact scenes are we looking at, how many interiors versus exteriors, and how many different setups. I can accurately guesstimate the time, and then because I'm me, I always add at least an hour buffer, but sometimes a 2-hour buffer just in case. So that way people are happy instead of upset if we actually go to the end time.
Under promise, over deliver.
Yeah.
Yep, that's my motto.
And if it's good to be flexible with your plans, but you want to go into a shoot with a plan.
Yes.
Nothing infuriates me more than getting on set and finding out that the director and the cinematographer have zero idea what the shots are going to be.
Yep.
And even worse if they don't quite understand what all the lines are going to be when they go in. But
That's scarier. That's scarier when the cinematographer has no idea what the film's about.
yeah.
And you're like, that's totally fine. I don't expect the DP to do a full in-depth analysis, but I would hope you would know how many people you need to capture on film today. Like, that would be nice. And thankfully, that is Danny. Like, Danny's in it. He's on it. He knows exactly what's going on. But it's nerve-wracking when the DP doesn't know
For sure.
what's being captured.
Yeah, you are describing an epileptic panic attack that I hope to never have. Just
When you get
for
on
the
set-
record,
when you get on
please
s-
avoid it for your cast and crew and for yourself.
Yeah.
Well, when you get on sets like that, in my experience, it's really hard to not take ownership of what you're doing, but it is hard to take ownership of the project itself when things are disorganized. In my experience.
Yeah.
And so the shoot that we just went through, everything was very well organized. Everybody had a job that was clearly identified, and everybody was comfortable helping out where they needed to help out.
Yeah.
Which I feel like overall, Jack, you made a set that was open to people taking ownership and going above and beyond, which I think that's what I should clarify was the good.
Thank you, Chuck.
There is,
Thank you.
If people had ideas, it was open to sharing them. Not always were the ideas accepted, but the open discourse was there. If we ran into problems, then the solution was quick and easy because everybody was paying attention to what they were doing. Everybody cared about the final project. And I think that's big. And so tips out there, make sure that you are organized. Make sure that you do have a shot list and a script. Like that should be a simple thing to say, but that's not always the case. I'm not going to say that happens often, but when it does, it's very memorable.
It's concerning.
So, and then listen to the people that are there helping you out if you're a writer director, because they want to do the best job that they possibly can. If it's volunteer, if you're paying them a lot, it doesn't matter because their name's going to be on it.
Yeah.
And so making sure that they're taking ownership and being open to that ownership. So I thought you did an excellent job with that.
Thanks, Chuck.
I think
Appreciate
that's
that.
a good sign of how to gauge where people are and how they feel about the film is at the end of everything. If they look at you and they say, "Yeah, can you just remove my name from the credits, please?"
Yeah. Ooh.
I think that's a good.
That would hurt.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good sign as to whether or not that shoot went well.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, if they're not proud of that would be pretty rough. So that's my good. Ugly was definitely like the equipment issues that I ran into. Fortunately, there's always redundancies. I had recordings going on top of recordings, so that helped. And then I guess the bad. I don't know. I don't have I got that good and that bad / ugly. So who else wants to share their good and bad and ugly?
I was
Victoria.
Like, you didn't really get sick or anything either. Like it was pretty smooth.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I was
That's-
trying to think of a bad for you. I got nothing.
I have a bad, which I think though is that you knew. I mean, and I think this is to being prepared. Is there were a couple times at the beginning of the setup, particularly the last day, we had child extras in addition to child actors, and I said in advance to Chuck, like, look, I know this is going to be like, thank you in advance when we're sitting next to each other for hours in post because this is going to be tricky, but I think if you can give your crew and acknowledge that, like, I've set you up for a challenge and I'm going to own that. And then Chuck, he looked at me and said, I know, but we're going to do the best we can. And we're going to figure it out. Because that there were a couple scenarios where we're all on wides. And I just know, I'm screwing the sound guy here. Like, and I'm screwing myself because I'm screwing the film. But like, I also trust, like, make a bad into a good, make a challenge into an opportunity. I also trust Chuck. Say that 10 times fast. Maybe I just didn't want to get it out because I don't really mean it.
Trust me, everything will be just fine.
I trust Chuck so inherently and his post-production skills that I would look to him and say, hey, this is on me. I know I set you up for a challenge, but are we good? Can we figure it out? And you know what? It's not a bad. He was like, we'll do the best we can and we'll figure it out.
And that, I guess, that's a good point. I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a bad thing, but as a sound person, you get thrown into situations where when you're on an indie film set and you only have so many shots before the sun sets, you can't hold until the traffic dies down. So unfortunately, you're just going to have to lean on the lav mics most likely, because they're going to pick up less of that or get a stronger source from the actors, and then do what you can in the mix in post to add some more ambience, make the scene feel like how it needs to feel. So yeah, that was.
And
but it'll be a challenge. But that's the thing, is you can't. I'm sure there's compromises that need to be made for the shot as well, because everybody's there.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is the natural lighting that you get this at this exact moment when the shot needs to happen. So this is the sound quality that you're going to get. There it is.
There you
That's
go.
it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Do you want to share, Victoria? You're good and bad and ugly?
Yeah, I think hardest day was the first day for me. That is the least I've ever done on a set in my life, and I hated not having any idea what I was supposed to be doing. That was really hard for me.
You weren't acting that day.
I was not acting that day, and I was really just there to kind of be support for Sam in case she needed any questions answered or didn't really understand how something was going, because she hadn't worked on a set with us before. So it was kind of just to fill her in.
And she was assistant director.
Yeah, she was
For
AD.
context, she was training our AD who had not done AD work.
She's
or only
done
a little
AD
bit.
work
Who was
a little bit.
fabulous and intrepid and would never work without her.
Yeah.
But she was relatively new.
Yes, she's relatively new and had never worked with you before.
Correct.
So I was basically just a trainer, because I didn't want to butt in too much, because this is Sam's gig. So I was doing BTS photos, and that was about it. And that was a struggle for
You're
me.
You're not one to sit on your hands.
I did not enjoy that. That was really, really difficult. And then I felt bad, because then we went directly into the next day that had the 6 a.m. call and the 9 p.m. call. And I, at that point, was so up in my head about being producer, I don't know if I was actor well enough, even though my only job that day was actor. So, yeah.
She did great.
She did fantastically.
It felt rusty, for sure. It felt rusty. So if you're an actor or performer, never take that skill set for granted. Always be back in your classes, and always make sure that you're continually working on them and polishing them, because they can get very rusty very fast, just in case you were wondering. And then ugly was probably my stress levels on that day, the long day. Because we had talked through kind of changing some of the beats, and I knew we only had so long to get everything done. We had from sunup to sundown to get every single thing that we needed for the bulk of this, which had initially started at, close to 16 pages, I think, something like that, which is a lot for one day. And so then when we were talking about changing some beats and things, I know I got very anxious, because then I was like, am I going to know my lines still? Am I going to be able to carry these beats if we change the lines? There was just a lot of self-doubt. So that one, then I get stressed, and then I don't feel like I show up as my best self. So there were a few hours that morning I think I was a little rough to be around. So
She was fabulous.
Yeah, totally easy to be around.
no, I feel like I was probably a little stressed and
But validating
anxious.
what you're saying. We're not trying to invalidate that.
Yeah, but no, I am. I'm totally invalidating it.
Okay. Chuck is. You were fabulous.
Thank you. But yeah, then I think the good was absolutely just being able to be on a set where we can talk to everybody, and everybody's open. Nobody feels like they're above anybody else. Everybody recognizes how integral every other person on this set is. There isn't a caste system.
Oh, nice.
Which I shouldn't say that when it's spoken, so you can't tell that I meant the cast with an E.
There we go.
Yeah. But
Double entendre.
yeah, that was not anyway. But it didn't feel cliquey. It didn't feel like, oh, well, you're an actor, sit down. You don't get to have an opinion about this. Or, well, you're assistant camera. Can you please leave this to the DP? Like, none of it felt like that, which was really nice. And I think just, especially for such heavy topics and such sensitive topics that were covered in this film, I feel like that was so important, that everybody was comfortable and everybody felt safe and everybody felt comfortable enough to just be themselves and express themselves in a respectful way. That was really important and really cool. That doesn't happen on every set.
Yeah.
Plus, everybody's really fun. too. There were a lot of jokes.
Yeah.
There was a lot of jokes. So
Yeah,
now those
everybody
live
had
on
a sense of
forever.
humor. I like that
Good
one.
time was
Yeah.
had by all.
Yeah.
Jack,
it
what do you
was.
got for good, bad, ugly?
I would say, I'll tell you the ugly. I'll go in reverse order. The ugly was realizing that they were at one point in time, I woke up in the middle of the night and realized that I had not connected the scene. But that's the benefit of being a writer and director. Very quickly, they leave a scene happy and giddy playing pine cone soccer. In other words, just kicking a pine cone down the trail. And then in the next scene, they come and it's alluded to that they've been hiking and walking in the woods for hours. And we could have filled that with miscellaneous B-roll, which we were going to gather. But it was a drastic change in tone that needed an interstitial moment that if we didn't have, which wasn't originally there, the audience would feel, at least in my perspective, feel manipulated. Luckily, it came to me in the middle of the night, and the first thing the next morning, we found a shot, and this is where some of the ugliest things can become some of the most beautiful. I can let Chuck, because it's his favorite shot in the movie. We found this beautiful shot with the sun rising. It was smoky, because we've had a lot of wildfires in the Pacific Northwest. And so we found this beautiful strip of light coming through these two trees and did a super wide, I believe we're on a 25 there, of the two characters walking back to camera into the light, if you will. And it was a gorgeous shot, and it's going to beautifully connect those two scenes. And it was ugly if we had not gotten that, and feeling that was, it would have been really ugly. I had a moment in the middle of the night where I said, all these people came and I fucked this up. But the muses, somebody spoke, and we realized it. And that's the beauty of being a writer and a director and having a team of people who are willing to adapt and jump in and say, hey, we just had a crazy day last night, but I'm adding a shot. And everyone said, okay, let's get it. And then I would just say the bad turned also, I'm an optimist. I'm going to turn a bad. Our final location was donated to us, and it's a wonderful play area. It's a cafe. There's an ice cream scene there, but it's in a retail space in a strip mall, and they have, everyone can imagine it in their minds, those floor-to-ceiling plexiglass windows that just throw glare everywhere.
Oh, true. I forgot about that.
And we did our best to set deck it, and the shots that we got were beautiful.
Yeah.
But there was a final shot that we really needed to get. Our two characters having their final beat, and their singles looked great, but we needed a two-shot, because if this is a story about friendship and they're having a final moment, you need to see them together. You can't just cut to their singles. And our cinematographer, I said to Danny, we lined up everything. He even had a skateboard at one point. We're going to try to do a DIY push-in dolly shot.
Yeah.
But just shooting into those windows was hideous. I mean, maybe this is the ugly. It was just bad. Like everything I looked at, I turned to him and I said, buddy, this is just bad. And that's, and he agreed. And so we made a drastic choice to flip the 180, make it a big moment. And our cinematographer found this beautiful panning shot that, while not a traditional two-shot, has a certain level of gravitas. We're describing it to you, but hopefully you'll see it in the final cut. That turned out to be one of my favorite shots in the whole movie, and really did bring the finale, the coda of the film together. And then very briefly, the good is, it is an absolute dream to have something you imagine in your head become a reality. But I said this on the last podcast, that the filmmaking process is a gift, and that the process and the product being just as beautiful and magical and loving in equanimity is the best part about being a filmmaker, and getting to work with the people that we worked with. And to allude back to what Chuck was saying, that everyone not only committing to the project, but trying to make it better because they wanted to and because they were committed to the story. I made a joke on set that when you're a director, that means I don't do anything. Really. I mean, I'm serious.
Oh, be careful. I said something similar once, and I got raked over the coals.
Oh, no.
for it.
When things go bad, you do a lot. But when things go well, you just admire and trust and respect the people you work with. And I just want to end with a note of what could be better than feeling incredibly grateful for these two people and the incredible cast and crew that went into making Pineapple Promise.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah,
for
thanks. You did
successful-
it.
Congrats to you two.
I'm excited to see what comes of this. So we'll bring you back for a post-production episode. And then we talked about as well, you and Victoria are working on some distribution ideas, film festival ideas. So we'll keep updating everybody as this project moves ahead in real time. If you're up to coming back, Jack, I'm assuming that.
Would love to, especially to hear Chuck's ugly on post-production sound.
Oh, yeah. I'll break that down all in like very detailed.
Lurid
Just
details.
Yeah, there it is.
granular.
Lurid. That was the word I was looking
That's
for.
it.
So thank you all for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, follow, do the thing from wherever you're ingesting
If you're
this.
still
liked it.
here at this point, because
Yeah.
this episode has gone on for a hot minute longer than we typically do, but if you are still here at this point, just do what you know you want to do. Share it with a friend.
Yeah, maybe even tell someone.
Yeah.
That would be good. Tell someone that's not your friend, because you just said share it with a friend. Just tell somebody random.
What they said.
All right. Shall we succinctly say farewell at this juncture?
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
So long.
Bye.